You got a good hum coming from something. It's okay, buddy. Could just be the Holy Spirit. You don't know. Just trying to speak to us. So glad you're here this morning as we kind of begin. We're like a week late into this, but getting into this Advent series. And so glad that we get to spend some time on this together. For me, this always this week is my favorite of the Advent weeks. We celebrate hope together. And I don't know about you. I feel like hope is one of those things we talk about a lot, especially in the church. We talk about it a lot here because I think it's one of the things that we have lost the ability to do. If I'm being honest, I really just think that. I remember a few years ago when we first moved to Florida, we had gotten tickets to go to the Clearwater Marine Aquarium. Anybody familiar with this? They'd had the dolphin tail movies, and there was like this whole thing about this dolphin who lost its tail and how they put it, a prosthetic on there, and it was this great story. And my daughter, Jane, if you don't know, she would rather be underwater than above it. And so she was like really excited to go to the aquarium. I remember we had bought tickets, and we had like gotten, everything together. We figured out how we would do this. Now, what we didn't know is there was at the time the smaller aquarium, and there was like all this mess of things. First of all, there were a lot of people there. There were like so many people. And we had to get a stroller through there because we had Jane, we had Oliver. We had to like push the stroller around. And so the stroller wasn't fitting through most things. We couldn't really get it from place to place. People were in the way of every exhibit. We couldn't really see much. Winter was having a bad day. She wasn't even available for us. I don't know. She has a very busy schedule apparently at that time, and her agent said no to us or something. I don't know what happened. But we couldn't see Winter. It was just like everything was kind of a mess. And I remember we walked back out to the parking lot afterwards, and we were like so disappointed. Like this did not go the way we thought it would. And I remember asking Jane, I said, so, what do you think? Like, how'd you feel? And she literally looked at me, she goes, it was even better than I hoped. Now, either she sets her bar real low for what she was expecting, which maybe we all need to learn to do that. I don't know. Or there was something in it where it was actually better than I hoped. Now, I would ask you this question. When was the last time in your life that something happened that was better than you hoped? Like you walked away from something and you were like, that was even better than I thought it could have been. I would say in our day-to-day lives that happens very, very seldomly. We're just not built for that. As a culture, we don't live in a place of things being better than we hoped. I would say we more often live in a place where our hope is constantly being fatigued. Our hope is constantly kind of failing us. I would say it's a fleeting feeling at best, where we aren't holding on to hope. We don't have hope. That's really something that we talk about as a culture that we believe in. But at the end of the day, I don't see a lot of people who live with a whole lot of hope. And I'll include the church in that conversation. We don't live as a people with a lot of hope. And I think this is one of the most important things for us to understand. I've talked about it many times. The thing that is remarkable about hope is that hope is the thing that makes us human. This is the most human part about us. No other creature has the ability to hope for things it has not seen. No other creature can create a future in its mind of a preferable version of what they want it to be. No other creature can do that. They only know what they have seen. They only have experienced what they've experienced, and they only know the pain or the possibility that they've already seen. They don't have the ability to think beyond that. Besides what like movies have told you or whatever. We watched not long ago with my kids. They watched the Bee Movie with Seinfeld. You remember this movie? It was not the best work of Seinfeld, if I'm being honest. It's very problematic. There's also a part where the bee and a human woman have like an actual romantic relationship, which really opens up some weird questions really quickly for your kids. Where they're like, what's going on? You're like, I don't know either. I'm not going to try to explain this to you. But this so the movie, unless you've watched those movies, yes, maybe there's bees out there that believe there's something better, but I'll be honest, I've never seen a colony that was like, what we need to do is we need to create a better HOA than this hive that we're in, because I hope for something better than what this is, right? Like they don't have a hope for something greater. This is the way they live, right? There's no society of animals that's thinking, how can we redo this? I agree with them. We should topple HOAs, and I'm for that. This is the anarchy I believe in, is defund the HOA. That's what I believe, and that's my platform I'll be running on in the next elections, is defund the HOAs, right? But there's no bees out there that are doing that. There's no pride of lions where they're like, we should rethink the way that this pride works. It is what it is. It functions the way it functions. There's no hope for something greater. The thing that makes us human is that we have this ability to hope, and some people would say it's the most important thing about us. I've referenced before, but in certain training, especially in Navy SEAL training, we knew some SEALs that were going through their SEAL training in Virginia Beach a few years back, and they were telling us these are the things that they're taught. They're taught that rule of threes. The rule of threes is that you can go for 3 weeks without food, you can go for 3 days without water, you can go for 3 minutes without air, and you can go for 3 seconds without hope. This is what they're taught. This is how fundamentally important it is to us as humans. Martin Luther would make the case that it's so important that Martin Luther would say that this is the most important thing about us. He says that everything that is done in the world is done by hope. Everything. And I agree with him, actually. I think that everything we do in this world is run by hope, but the problem is it's failing in us, and it's fatigued in us, and I think part of that is an American problem, if I'm being honest. I think part of it is that we as Americans, our culture has taught us certain things that we were going to experience, right? We're all going to experience the best of everything. When you were a kid, you were probably taught that you could be anything you wanted to be, right? I was not, because my parents were pretty realistic and they saw how limited I was pretty fast. They're like, you're going to be something, like we're praying for that, your future. But like if you saw, that was the way we were all brought up. If you go to Epcot now, go to Disney, walk through Epcot. We were supposed to have like flying cars by now, and all we've got so far is like Labubus, whatever those are. We don't, this is where we're at, guys. It's a huge letdown, if I'm being honest. This is where we're supposed to be, and we were all taught we're going to be up and to the right the rest of our lives. The American culture will always be on a growth pattern. There's always going to be better, and everything will be better. Your life will always be perpetually better. But disappointment sets in when our experience does not match our expectation. When your experience does not match your expectation, suddenly you start to feel not hope, but discouragement or despair or at least disappointment. And as I've mentioned before, some sociologists say that we live in the culture of disappointment. It's the most prevailing American culture phenomenon is disappointment, because we've been taught that everything is going to be better than what it was before. Everything's going to be up and to the right. Your life will always be perpetually better. And so we've lost this ability to hope, I think. I think we don't know what to do with it. David Brooks, in his newest book, in his book, The Second Mountain, he writes this: America has become a sadder society, is what he says. He says 45% of high school students say that they are persistently hopeless and despondent. Now, you can say, well, that's not me, that's passed down to them. But he says, actually, overall, the number of people who say they're at the lowest happiness category is up by 50%. And I don't think we can just blame this on this is a younger generation or whatever. Well, this is the world we've created for them, by the way. We've all had a hand in that. I think we're all living in this place where it's not just high school students who are feeling hopeless and despondent. I think we all are. I think our culture has set us up for failure of that. And now this feeling of hopelessness, which is all it is a lot of times, is our hope is built on feelings. I think our hope is built on a lot of things that we think are things that are really fleeting in our culture. They're not things that stay. And so what we live with is this idea of American culture and American hopefulness, which is not a real thing. I would say and I'll just give you a couple things I've thought about with this. This isn't like scientific by any means. But as you study hope or you look at what hope is, I would say in our culture it's based around a few things. I think that we think hope is attached to a handful of things. I think one is prosperity. We think that hope is when things are growing and we are making more money or we're getting more stuff. Our hope grows with those things over and over again, right? It continues to grow as our stuff grows. You've felt more hopeful at times where you've had more stuff. I would say the opposite is true. When you've had less, you've felt less hopeful. It's just kind of the way it works. I would also say progress. We feel like as a culture we're constantly making progress, whatever you think that means. Whether it's that we're progressing towards actually going backwards as a culture, which is actually a form of progress, or if we're progressing towards some preferred future of whatever you think that might be. Whether it's an AI revolution or it's a more of an industrial revolution, whether it's whatever you think the thing is, we're going to move towards this preferred future. That's where we start to get hopeful. We start to kind of attach it to that. I think that's really dangerous. And the other thing I think that we attach it to a lot of times is maybe politics or to a nation of sorts, or we attach it to that. And when the nation is not doing well, we lose hope in what's around us. We attach it to our politics. We attach it to politicians, to pundits, people in power. We attach it to those things. And when those things are moving the right way, we feel pretty good about it. But as soon as those things start to fail, I will say that hope starts to sink as well. When those drop, hope sinks as well. I don't care what you saw in the Sandra Bullock movie with Harry Connick Jr. Hope does not float. It doesn't. Good. So we do have some Sandy fans in here. I'm glad to see that. But it doesn't float. I would say it actually sinks. It starts to fall to the bottom. That's how we live. But I do also believe there's this other kind of hope. It's not an American version of hope. It's not the up and to the right. It's not politics. It's not progress. It's not prosperity. I think there's another kind of hope that is very, very different because it's anchored in a person. And that hope is the biblical hope, which is very, very different. And we talk about hope at Advent at this time of year. We're looking at that kind of hope. We spend time reminding ourselves of what that hope looks like, a hope that's attached to this person of Jesus. And that's a hope that we're told over and over again will not fail us. And so if I give you just a working definition of what I think hope is or how we want to talk about that in this season, John Mark Comer gives us one version of this that I really like, where he says, hope is the expectation of the coming good, founded on and fulfilled in the person and promises of God. And one of the things I love about this season is that that's what we do, is we kind of pull back a little bit to look at that. Now, Jürgen Moltmann, who's another philosopher and author who's German, he would kind of say it this way. He says, to hope is to bind oneself to the future of God. You're binding yourself to what God has, what his purposes are, that what we would call the kingdom of heaven, that future present that's living in and among us. That's what we're like attaching ourselves to. And when we look at Advent, our goal is that we spend time looking back so that we can look forward. We look back at what have been the promises and in the hopefulness that's been in the past so that it informs how we hope today. We look back at what has happened in the past where people might have been in different circumstances. What did they attach their hope to then? So we know what it looks like to hope now. We look at them looking for the first coming of this Messiah so that we know what to look for at the second coming of this Messiah and what the world should look like now. That's what we experience every Advent. And I hope today that our hope is renewed in this time. So if you have your Bible, I would encourage you to look at this passage with me. We're in Jeremiah. It's kind of just right past, like if you open to the middle, you're going to go just a little bit to your right. And in Jeremiah chapter 33, we see this passage. And it's a hopeful passage. It's a beautiful passage, right? What was read for us just a little bit by Jamie and Tammy is this beautiful passage that comes right in the middle of this. It says, verse 14, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will fulfill the good promise I made to the people of Israel and Judah. In those days and at that time, I will make a righteous branch sprout from David's line, and he will do what is just and right in the land. In those days, Judah will be saved and Jerusalem will live in safety. This is the name by which it will be called. The Lord is our righteousness. Now, that's a beautiful passage, and it feels hopeful, right? Like it feels pretty good. I think we all can agree that that's a pretty hopeful passage. And when you look close at it, it feels that way. If you zoom in on that passage, it feels very hopeful. But if you were to zoom out, you'd be like, this isn't hopeful, this is horrible. This is really bad. If you zoom out on what's happening at the time, this is not a hopeful moment. This isn't a prosperity moment. This isn't a moment where all the politics are working for people. This isn't a moment where progress is being made. This is a moment where everything opposite of that is happening, right? The setting of this at this moment is in a nation, in Judah, that has been not just split once. Israel has been split at this point once in a civil war between the nations where they split themselves. But now Judah is being seized by another nation called Babylon that was ruthless and came in and is at this moment seizing the city, taking over Jerusalem, the temple that they had come to know and love and build themselves. They were taking over all of the homes. They were taking over all the people, making slaves out of these people. This is not a hopeful moment. This is a horrible moment. And in this moment, in fact, the author, do anybody know who wrote this book? What was it? Jeremiah? That wasn't a trick question. Nice job, guys. You're really good. You're doing really good. You guys are such scholars. And that's what I love about this. We're getting so good at this. Yeah, Jeremiah, he wrote this book, right? And Jeremiah is at this point kind of honestly, you can tell, frustrated and almost losing his voice. He's actually been preaching about this situation for 32 chapters leading up to this. He's got a lot to say about this coming destruction. He's been warning people of it. People have mostly turned him away. He's had to kind of go a little bit crazy to get his message across. He's basically losing his voice in this whole thing to the point where he starts crying a lot. And you don't want to be the friend who's crying all the time. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's okay occasionally, but you know the friend that like comes over and every single time you're like, are we doing this again? We're crying again. It happens in my house all the time. We have, there's a staff meeting that happens for Applause Children's Theater that happens in my house at least once a week. And I'll be upstairs working in my office, and I'll walk downstairs, and Marie and Katie are sitting at their desk, which is my couch, and they are both bawling, just bawling. And I'll be like, is everything okay? And they're like, actually, it's great. It's great. Everything's great right now. And I'm like, this is wild. This is very different than my workplace. Very different. My staff meeting has never looked like this. But it's great, you know. And like the people like this is how it works. And he's acted in this place where he's crying all the time. He's known as the weeping prophet because he has so much to say about this. He has so many feelings. And he's gotten to the place where I think he's so frustrated. He's now weeping over what's going to happen. And people are starting to tune him out, and people are starting to like lose hope in what he has to say, and he's starting to lose hope in them. There's this symbiotic loss of hope between each other. And at this moment, this author is sitting not just in the middle of a siege, like it's not just happening around him. In fact, I kind of tricked you with this, but if you zoom in on that verse, that's great, but zoom out a little bit. And if you have your Bible open, look at the first 3 verses of this chapter. Look at what happens in Jeremiah chapter 33, verses 1 through 3. Notice where he's at. While Jerusalem was still confined in the courtyard of the guard, the word of the Lord came to him a second time. Notice where he's at. He's in the courtyard of the guard. The people who are taking over, he's literally sitting in their prison. This would have been what we would today maybe call a concentration camp or a camp of sorts where you would take in people that were going to be slaves of yours or going to be put to maybe death or put into slavery. You would pull those people in. They were sitting in the courtyard under the guard's watch. That's where he is when this word comes to him. It's not exactly like everything's doing great. This isn't a lot of progress. Politically, things are not going well. There's not a lot of prosperity. He's literally watching his city get ransacked. And while he's there, it says, verse 2, this is what the Lord said, who made the earth, the Lord who formed it and established it. The Lord is his name. And I love this because here's what he says. Call to me and I will answer you and tell you great and unsearchable things you do not know. Here's what I love about this. He's saying, like, call to me because I can see things you can't see. You're seeing a setting that you're in, a specific scenario that you're stuck in. I can see beyond that. Call to me because I can see a perspective you can't see at this moment. You don't see it. You're stuck in the courtyard of the guard, but let me tell you and let me reaffirm you in this hope because this hope is not attached to the place you're in right now. This hope is attached to the person of Jesus. We have to redefine that. You're not stuck to this place. Walter Brueggemann, who's a philosopher who wrote about this quite a bit, he wrote in his work on hope, he said, hope, on the contrary, is subversive. I love this. And I do believe this. I believe that hope is a defiant choice. I think in our culture, choosing hope is like, it's like crazy. It's like when you go to, eat food with people and they order like broccoli on pizza and you're like, that's a defiant choice. That's what it feels like, right? And you're like, we're going crazy today. That's what it feels like. It's a defiant choice. Hope is the defiant choice. It just is. This is a tough thing in our culture to choose because it's easier to choose hopelessness than it is to choose hope. But I believe, as Christians, we have to, because he says it's subversive, for it limits the grandiose pretensions of the present. Like this thing that you're in the middle of has no hold on you when you have hope. And the Lord speaks to him in this exact setting. And here's what he gives him. He gives him 3 things that I want to walk through real quick. But he gives them three things in this passage that we're going to go back to in verse 14. He gives them a promise, he gives them a person, and then he gives them a people. Here's what the people are going to do. First thing he says, when we go back to verse 14, here's what he gives them, this promise. The days are coming. Notice this. I love this line. The days are coming. Now, we're not there yet, but he's calling them backwards to call them forward. See what he says? He says, the days are coming. There's going to be a day, declares the Lord, I will fulfill the good promise I made to the people of Israel and to Judah. See, he's calling them back to the promise. This was the promise I made to you. Let's go back to that, and that will inform our future hope as well. I'm going to call you back so that we can move forward. And as he does this, he calls them back to the promise. Now, any Jew reading this, anybody that Jeremiah is talking about, they all knew exactly what these promises were. This isn't a secret to them. They knew exactly what he was talking about, that there would be, no matter what happened in their present, there would be a king who would come, who would restore all things back to right. There would be a king. This was the promise that was made by God all the way back with Abraham, and he made it to Abraham, and then he made it to Moses, and then he makes it through David and says there will always be this king that will come through this line, and he will set all things back to right. Remember that promise. Let's call you back so that you can move forward. And it's the promise he makes not just to Judah, this nation they're in, but to Israel, meaning Jacob himself. This is the promise I've made to you. Don't forget about this promise. This is it. He gives them that promise, but then he gives them a person. He says in verse 15, in those days, again, notice, in those days is every single line. In those days, at that time, I will make a righteous branch sprout from David's line. He will do what is just and right in the land. He will do what is just and what is right in the land. Now, he's calling for a person. There's going to be a branch. Notice why the word branch is capitalized there, because that branch is talking about Jesus. It is a person that he's attaching this to that will sprout from David's line. Now, what's interesting is in this phrase, if you read this in the Hebrew, it actually says, I will make a righteous sprout. That's what it says. The word branch and sprout are the same word. I will make a righteous sprout. Which I think is great, and maybe you should write that in, because I kind of wish it would say that in our Bibles. I will make a righteous sprout. And it just sounds like you're stuttering a little bit, but like sprout. And so if you're making a righteous sprout, now here's why that's interesting to me, is because they're really digging into this idea of sprout. Not necessarily this branch that would shoot off, but a sprout that would actually come from the ground, calling us to this imagery of like farming. Anybody in here grow plants? Yeah, me neither. Okay, a few of us know how to do that. You can get them to like come out of the ground and stuff. I'm real good at putting them in. That part, champion. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, they get bigger after that? We're going to have to learn the secret on that formula, because I've put a lot of things in the ground. I've not always seen the thing come out of the ground yet. But I'm still waiting. Some things I think are maybe they're seasonal. And by seasonal, I mean like a decade or every decade or so. They sprout, and I'm still waiting on that decade to come up. So about 2032, everybody get ready. We're going to have an awesome garden. But this sprout is a farming image, and that's what they're trying to show us here. Now, here's the thing. I don't know a lot about farming. I've never been one. My grandparents had a farm, though. And here's what I do know. As we would go plant seeds, and we would have to actually plant the seeds in the ground to grow alfalfa and grow hay and stuff. As we would do those things, there is a part of it where you actually do not know when it's going to sprout. Like, we don't know the day. We didn't know exactly how it was going to happen. We knew that we would plant that seed. At the end of the day, I think there's some hope to this, because you and I don't know how deep and how dark where that seed might be is before it starts to sprout. Like, we don't know the depth of how far it might be in that darkness that it's in. Some of us in this room are in some real dark places right now. And there's a part of us that think there's probably no hope in that place, because it's real dark and it's real deep. And it's hard to see the way out of that. But maybe that's just where the seed starts to sprout. And maybe that's where the sprout happens. Maybe that's where that is met. Maybe that's the darkness that's broken through with light. Maybe that's a seed that's been dormant for a long time, but suddenly it starts to bloom. And there's hope here that he's talking about, that you don't know when it's going to happen, but there is a promise that it will. That this is going to happen. Remember this, God promises throughout the Bible what he will do. The problem is God never tells us when he will do what he will do. You find me the verse where he gives you the day and the time, and he tells you exactly when he's going to do the thing he said he's going to do. You tell me. I'd love to know. Because if we could figure that out, we could start a cult together. But it turns out he never says any of these things exactly when they will happen. He tells us what will happen. He does not tell us when it will. It's real frustrating. But sometimes we have to be at the darkest place before that sprout happens. And here he says there's going to be this sprout that will come about, this person that you can attach yourself to. And in verse 16, then he makes this final decree where now it's about a people. There's going to be a people involved. And this whole group of people will be part of it. In those days, verse 16, Judah will be saved, and Jerusalem will live in safety. These nations, these people. And this is the name by which it will be called, the Lord our righteous Savior. That the Lord will be our righteous Savior. Not just setting, remember, righteousness does not just mean right living between us and God, but it means right living between us and each other as well. All things will be set to right. And these people will live under this banner, not a banner of a nation, but they will live under the banner of the Lord who has set all things to rights. That's how the people will live. Now, I want you to notice, because there's an idea here that hope changes everything. New Song. Anybody remember New Song? They were a group that sang Christian music. They had a song that was called Hope Changes Everything. And far be it from me to argue with the theology of New Song, who also wrote the song Christmas Shoes. I think it's one of the worst things that's ever happened to Christendom is the song Christmas Shoes. We can talk about it another time. Got a lot of strong feelings about that song. So far be it for me to, push back on New Song. But hope changes everything. Sure, that sounds nice. You know what hope didn't change? Just going to say it. You know what hope didn't change? Their setting. It did not change the situation they were in. Here's what I think we want hope to do, is hope will magically pull us out of the situation. That's not what it does. Hope is not about us being magically drawn out of the situation. It is about God entering into the situation. Those are very different things. The situation did not change. He's still in the same place. It just changes, it doesn't change our situation. It changes how we see our situation. That's what happens in this moment. It's very different than we thought. And it's easy for us to like this idea of hope. It's easy for us to talk about this. The Lord's our righteousness. It's all great stuff, and there's a hopeful thing coming. It's nice to like this, but you know what's really hard is to live this. Right? It's a lot harder to live this way. Because we're in this room right now, and I know, that we have family things that are going on, and some of your families, it is dark right now. You're in the courtyard of the guard. You're in a dark spot at the moment where you have things going on for family members that you're praying for and things you're not sure about, and you're feverishly, frantically praying over those people. And you're kind of hoping against hope, and you're starting to probably lose a little bit of that at the moment. I know there's some people in this room that where we have health issues or things that we're starting to get to that place where we're not feeling like, we're not seeing the prosperity, we're not seeing the progress. We're starting to feel like things aren't working for us. And so we're starting to lose that hope. It's starting to fail within us. It's getting more and more feeble by the moment. I mean, there are some of us in this room where we have, I mean, just being honest, like, where we've got Christmas around the corner, and they're like, we know the income we have, and there's paychecks that may not cover what we thought they would. I mean, I'm just saying, like, in real life, hope's a lot harder, isn't it? Like, it sounds good. I mean, it's fun to talk about. We like it, but living it's really hard. So if you don't mind, I want to give you, there's one author who gave a couple of these things. I kind of took it and just played with this a little bit. But what I'd like to do is kind of give you three things that when we live it, and here's maybe some handrails to try to live hope in a day-to-day way. So there's three things, and they all start with R because I'm a pastor and we have to do that. That's like the rule. And so the first is to release, the second is to remember, and the third is to return. Here's what I mean by that. So the first thing, if we really want to learn to hope, the first thing we have to learn to do is to release control. We have to learn to release control. Now, I think that's very hard for us in our culture because I actually think control is the number one measure of success in our culture. The more things you control, the more successful you are seen to be, right? Whether it's people that you control, whether it's things, it's your stuff that you have control over, whether it's your schedule or your ability to be free to do certain things or not, or choose to be a part of this thing or not this thing. That amount of control is really our number one measure of success, I think, in our culture today, right? And so it's really hard for us to release control because I think that's what we want more than anything. In Americans, we are trying to become people in control all the time. We're still working out ways where we can be in control of every single thing, whether it's our health, whether it is our wealth, whether it is our families, whether it is other people, whether it is the politics or the government, whatever it is, we want to be in control of everything. We're so used to it, we want more and more of it. But we have to realize there are some things, and I hate to break this to you, maybe it's going to be tough. There are some things you can't control. And I'm sorry to be I didn't mean to bring it down here. There's some things you can't control. And we have to be willing to actually release control. And you know why? First of all, control is the antithesis of faith. Let me say that again. Control is the antithesis of faith. And control is the greatest barrier to trust. You cannot trust someone when you want to control that person. You cannot trust a God when you want to control that God. Those two things are incompatible with each other. Many of you know, I had a major health emergency a few years ago. My kids, it was during COVID, my kids wanted to learn how to ride bikes. It was around this time of year, and it was like around Christmas time, and they wanted to learn to ride their bikes, and so we got them the right size bikes and did the whole thing. And they really hadn't ridden a whole lot, and so I went out with them. And I would do the thing that every dad has to do at some point in their life, where you have to run alongside your child as you hold the seat. You know what I'm talking about? You hold the seat in the handlebar and you run alongside, and you're just running up and down, streets, and you're running up and down sidewalks, and you look like a complete idiot. And you're sweating, and the kids are like, let go, but you're like, I'm not letting go. And then, but then as soon as you let go, they're like wobbling, and so you're like, I'm going to take over. And you're fighting back and forth, and you're having this whole thing, right? But you're having this thing where, they're having a great time, and sometimes they think they're doing an awesome job, and you're the one holding them up, and sometimes they are doing an awesome job, and you're like, I just need a breather, so good luck out there. You're on your own now, kid, because I'm tired, so good luck. And you have this fight back and forth. And I remember after we did that, I'd been running them down the street so much that I got inside and I had this chest pain. I was like, oh no. And it was really bad. And I couldn't breathe. I couldn't take a deep breath. And it hurt so bad. And I was like, I think I'm going to die. I think this is it. And I told Marie, I was like, I don't want to scare you, but I think I'm going to die. So I let her in easy. I was like, don't worry about it too much, but I think this might be it, And at least the kids know how to ride their bikes, and on my way out, my final words. And so, and I was like, I'm really in pain. And she was like, well, so she called Diana Morris, who's a nurse, and was like, hey, I don't know what's going on, but Kevin's in a lot of pain in his chest. And Diana was like, I don't think there's anything to worry about, but the fact that you're calling us at it was at 11 o'clock at night or something. She was like, it's a weird thing, so it might be serious. So I called another friend of mine who's a chiropractor, and I said, hey, I've got this pain in my chest. I don't know what to do with it. He said, well, I know what it is. Why don't you come over to the house? So I went over to his house, It's like 11:30 at night. He has his chiropractic table in his garage, because that's apparently what they do, these psychos. And so he sits me on his table, and he runs his hand down my chest like this, which was, weird. And I was like, buy a guy dinner first. And so he's running his hand down my chest, and he right on my sternum. And he feels this spot, and he goes, you feel that right there? And he puts my hand on it. And one of my ribs had shifted, and it was just a little low, just a little out of place. And every rib has a nerve ending on it. And so you really feel that nerve ending, and it was in the wrong place. And so he lays me down on the table, and he says, I'm just going to pop it back in place real quick. And he was like, so what else do you have going on tonight? And as I'm talking, he jams that thing, and I saw stars, and I may have thought words that I'd never thought before. I mean, like conglomerations of bad words. Like there was like, you know what I mean? Like there were so many thoughts in your head. They're like, that was the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And I hate his guts now. I don't even talk to him anymore, that guy. I stood up, I was like, what did you do to me? He was like, I had to pop it back in place. And he was like, it was out of place. And he said, here's what happened is as you were running around holding up your kids, as you're holding them up, right, your body, you're fighting against what they're doing, and they're fighting against what you're doing. See, control is the antithesis of faith. You see what I'm saying? Control, both of us fighting against each other, is the barrier to trust, to trusting each other in this. This is true, by the way, not just of like our relationship with God. This is true of everybody around you. The more you want to control them, I promise you, the less you trust them. And you'll never trust them if you want to control them. The hard part for us is that we have to release control. Because I think what we want to do more than anything is we want to control, but still be able to do what only God could do, but we want to do it our way. Do you know what I'm saying? And you and I can't do it the way God can. I just don't think you can. I think you're a nice person. I think you're very capable. I don't think you can do what God does. I just don't think so. We have to release control. We have to allow him to take control. That's really hard for us because our hope is only going to be restored if we have a trust in the God that we trust this God that we have hope in. Or if we have faith in this God that we hope in. If we do not trust or have faith in, then we will never hope in that same God. Right? What does Hebrews say? That faith is a hope. Right? It's a hope in this God. We have to have faith in this God or we'll never hope in him as well. We have to release control to him, allow him to be the one that does this. Henry Nouwen says it this way, but Nouwen has a quote where he says, the man who has God for his treasure has all things in one. But most of us need to be torn from our grip on other things before we will trust him. Or again, I've used it before, but Elizabeth Gilbert of Eat, Pray, Love fame, in her TED Talk said it this way: you are afraid of surrender because you don't want to lose control, but you never had control. All you had was anxiety. And I believe that about our culture more than anything. We're not really gaining control. We're just getting a lot of anxiety. Trying to be God when only he can be God. But here's the other thing. That's step one in release. Let me just give you the other part of release, by the way. This is the part that might be harder. Is you don't just have to release your situation. You also have to release your schedule. Because God doesn't move at the pace you want him to move at. I promise that. The way you want it done and the timeline you want it done will probably not be the way he does it. And you're going to have to let those things go. Again, we see it all the way from the beginning of the Bible. You see it with Abraham, right? Abraham, God comes and says, you're going to be the father of a whole bunch of people. And he's like, when? And God's like, well, it'll be like when you're like 1,000, but like until then, just give it a second, Moses, he comes along, he's like, you're going to go and free this nation. You're going to build a whole new one. He's like, cool. And he's like, so when do we do that? He's like, well, first you're going to spend 40 years in this desert. Then you're going to spend another 40 years in the desert with them. And you're actually not even really going to see it in this lifetime. This is what he does. David, he comes and he anoints David as a young man and says, you're going to be the king of Israel. And then he's like, awesome. Like, do we go to the palace today? And he's like, no, don't get ahead of yourself. You're going to go back to being a shepherd. And then you're going to have the king who is the king try to murder you for like a while. And then you'll be king. But like, we want it to happen that moment, right? Like these anointings, these things that happen, it should happen right away. God does say what he's going to do, but he doesn't do it in the timeline you think he's going to do it. We have to release the schedule, allow him to be the one in charge. He'll tell you what he's going to do, but he's not going to tell you when he's going to do it. This is how it works. And waiting for us is so hard because we're not born for that. We don't like that. In American culture, it's the worst thing you can do. We hate to wait. We will pay so much money to not have to wait. You know, like we were at Disney the other day, and you know, like now they sell so many passes so that you can move in front of the line, and it is so expensive, and everybody's like, I'm paying it though, because the worst thing I can imagine doing today is waiting. It's the worst. I'll pay whatever I have to pay to get past all these other people to not wait. But in the Bible, waiting is actually seen as this like beautiful tension between us and God. It's something we have to do. The Hebrew words, there's two Hebrew words mostly used in the Old Testament for waiting. And the first one is this word yakal. Right? Yakal. Look at the person next to you. Say yakal. Yakal. Yeah, like a y'all, like a yakal. It's waiting eagerly. It is a nice waiting. Like it's good. And you are anticipating something. But there's this other word for waiting that is kavah. Look at somebody and say kavah. Kavah, which is expectantly waiting. And it's a word picture. Most of Hebrew words are a word picture. And it's a word picture meaning the twisting fibers of a strong cord. Here's what it means, is that you're pulling it tight. Like you're pulling the cord tight. There is a tension between you and God. Waiting is like you're both pulling on that same rope, just keeping it tight, waiting for the moment. You're holding it taut, waiting for that moment. And waiting is an active thing. I don't want you to think that waiting is passive. That's the problem we have. We think that waiting is a passive verb. It is not a passive thing. It's actually a practice, to be honest with you. In the Old Testament, it is seen as a practice for people to learn, that we learn to wait. If you think waiting is something that's passive, then I challenge you. Go watch a child who's standing in line at Disney. They know what they're waiting for. They're so excited. They can't wait. But I mean, beyond that, watch a parent whose spouse is about to give birth. Tell me that waiting is not an active verb. My favorite is watch a groom. Watch a groom who's standing at the front as a bride comes down that aisle, as he waits for his bride. Tell me that guy's just passively standing around. It's not a passive verb. It's actually a practice that we have to take seriously. It's a tension that we keep tight between us and God. We constantly do this with him. This is how waiting is supposed to be. So we have to give up, we have to release our schedule as well as our circumstance. Both things have to be released to God. Now, second is we do have to be people who remember, or people who have to remember what God has done. The rabbi, Jonathan Sacks passed away a few years ago, but he was a 21st century rabbi who was pretty well known in the UK. He's not the guy from the All In podcast, very different Sacks. But Jonathan Sacks wrote this. He said, the Jewish faith is a religion of memory, which I really like. Like he's like this guy, I really like this, it's a religion of memory. And I think that Christianity was supposed to be too, that we were supposed to actually remember things, but we're pretty good at forgetting. Here's what I mean by that is like when God has done something in your life, and I believe that you're probably here today because God has done something in your life at some point where he's intervened, he's provided, he's done something. I don't think you're here if he hasn't. But man, we forget pretty fast, don't we? Like, that's great, God, but what have you done for me lately? We have to remember what he has done. We go back to his faithfulness time and time again. We look back at this. Again, this is not a passive thing. This is a practice. In the Old Testament, God would tell people to put down stones. Remember the Ebenezer saying, take this, lay it down, remind yourself that this is where God intervened for you. And anytime you come along here, I want you to see that stone and remember, God did this for me. We don't do that anymore. We move from day to day so fast, we move from hour to hour so fast, that we forget what God has done and all the different times he's come through for us. And I would encourage you, make this an actual practice, not just a passive thing. Make it a practice where you are writing down things that God has done for you, where you are sharing those things with other people, like you're actually talking about it. This is what God did for me. Where we remember the stories over and over again of God's faithfulness. I'll be honest, if you were to take the Bible and you were to parse it down to the parts where God did something, like really did something, this is what we would have. It's pretty small. But like you have thousands of years, right, of things. There's a lot of downtime between God doing things is what I'm trying to say. People live for hundreds of years and God did maybe one thing in their lifetime. But those people's job was to write it down so the next generation would know what God did. And the next generation would know what God did for them and how God was faithful. We move so fast from thing to thing, thinking God should be just providing and protecting and doing all the things just minute by minute. And if he hasn't done it in this minute, he missed the boat. We have to remember the God he is and what he's done for us. Because otherwise we start to forget. And not just for us, but for generations to come. We forget how good God has been to us. There's a couple ways to look at this. Tozer and some other people write about how important this has been. Tozer says, we must practice the art of remembering God's mercies, for the heart quickly forgets what the mind does not deliberately hold. We have to constantly make this a practice. And then the last thing we have to do, the last thing we do is we return. Here's what's hard about returning. We return back to God. And here's why this is hard, is because our inclination is not to return to God. Our inclination is to run from God. This goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden. What was the inclination as soon as shame was felt? It was to run from God. But is that the source of hope? I'm going to say no. And we have to actually find ourselves returning to God. We have to come back over and over again. And this is why this season of Advent is so important. Is because every year we spend time returning to, looking backwards so that we can look forward. Reminding ourselves that as we come back to God, that we release these things and we remember what he has done and we look backwards so that we can look forward and we can return to God and walk with him from this point forward. This is what Advent is all about. This is why, as we talked about at the beginning, John Mark Comer would say this about Advent. I love his definition of hope, is that we return to him because expectation is the coming good founded in the person and the promises of God. You'll never understand the hope that is this expectation that are based on the promises and the person of God if you're not with that God. So we return to that God. So today, as we close, I want to give you just a few minutes to kind of process. And I want you to be able to release some things and spend some time in that. We're going to sing a little bit about just remembering God's faithfulness to us over and over again. And that we are going to return and just see our God as our hope. So we're going to sing as we close. And I would encourage if you want to journal a little bit about that, you can. What are the things you need to release? What are the things you need to let go of? What are the things that you need to remember? What are the things you need to actually remember that God did these things for me? He came through at these times. What are those stories you need to remember? And then what in us and who of us need to return to that God? We need to make our way back to him in this Advent season. So I'm going to give you some time to just do that as we close. I'm going to pray, and then we're going to sing together for just a bit before we head out of here. Let's pray together. Father, we thank you for this Advent season.